Next time you go to Walmart or Target to buy groceries, your credit card might just get declined at the register. Not because you missed a payment, not because you are over your limit, but because they decided your card costs them too much to accept. And millions of Americans have no idea this is already happening. To be clear, this is not a situation where you are going to walk up to the register at Walmart and suddenly nothing works. That is not quite the full picture. But there are significant shifts happening right now in how credit cards function at retail stores and grocery chains specifically, and the people who are going to feel it the hardest are the millions of Americans who depend on those cards just to put food on the table. That is not an exaggeration. That is exactly what the data is showing. Here's the thing most people do not fully appreciate about stores like Walmart and Target. Yes, they sell everything from electronics to clothing to garden furniture, but in reality, these companies have transformed into grocery operations. That is where the foot traffic is. That is where the repeat visits come from. That is the heartbeat of the business. And if you think about the people walking through those doors every single week, a massive share of them are leaning on credit cards to cover that grocery run. Not because they want to carry a balance, but because the cost of everything has gone up so fast and so far that for many households, the credit card is what stands between a full cart and an empty one. So when something changes about how those cards work at checkout, you need to pay attention, because it affects a lot more people than the headlines will tell you. Let me walk you through what triggered all of this. A few months back, there was a landmark legal settlement involving Visa and MasterCard. Now, this was not some overnight development. This lawsuit had been grinding through the courts for close to 20 years. Think about that. 2 decades of legal fighting between retailers and the 2 biggest card networks in the world, and it finally reached a resolution. And what came out of that settlement is something that is going to fundamentally shift the power balance between stores and the card companies in ways that will directly hit consumers at the checkout lane. Before this settlement, there was a hard rule in place. If a retailer decided to accept Visa or accepted MasterCard, they were required to accept every single card on that network. Every single one. It did not matter whether it was a basic no-fee debit card or a platinum travel rewards card loaded with perks. If the network was accepted, all cards on that network were accepted. That was the rule. But that rule is now gone. What replaces it is something that gives retailers a level of control they have never had before. Under the new terms, a store can now look at a specific type of card and say, "We are not taking that one." They can decline specific cards they have decided do not fit the economics of their operation. And the reason this matters enormously is that not all credit cards cost the same for a merchant to process. The fees that merchants pay to accept a card vary pretty widely depending on what kind of card it is. A basic card with no rewards might carry a processing fee around 1% or a bit less, but a premium card, a travel rewards card, a cashback card, a card that gives you 5% back on groceries, that card might carry a fee 2 or 3 times higher. The card company charges more because it needs to fund all those rewards that you love collecting. And that is where the grocery problem gets really sharp. Groceries operate on margins so thin it is almost hard to believe. We are talking about 1 to 2% on a good day. 1 to 2%. So picture this. You go to Walmart and you buy groceries with your premium cashback card. You get 2 or 3% back. But the store is paying maybe 2 or 3% just to process that transaction. They might be losing money on that sale, or at best breaking completely even. You can understand why, from a pure business standpoint, a grocery retailer looks at that equation and says, "This does not work for us anymore." And here is what the settlement also allows on top of card rejections. Surcharges. Retailers can now add a fee on top of your purchase if you choose to pay with a credit card, specifically targeting the premium cards that cost them the most to process. So what that means practically is this. You get to the register, you go to swipe your rewards card, and you are either told that card is no longer accepted here, or you are told that using that card is going to cost you an extra percentage on top of your total. Either way, it is going to feel like a gut punch to people who are not expecting it. And a lot of people will not be expecting it because stories like this do not get the mainstream attention they deserve. The premium rewards cards are the primary targets here. The cashback cards, the airline miles cards, the hotel points cards, the ones with the annual fees, and the sign-up bonuses. These are exactly the cards that cost merchants the most to process because every perk you earn comes at someone's expense, and for a long time that expense was being quietly passed along through higher shelf prices. But now, with this settlement in place, retailers have a more direct weapon. They can just block the card outright. The irony here is that the people who truly benefit from rewards cards are actually people with the financial cushion to pay off the balance in full every single month. But the people who are going to be hurt by this policy shift are people on the opposite end of the financial spectrum, who are using whatever card they have access to, just to get groceries home. Think about what this means for a household that is already stretched. Maybe they have one card. Maybe it is the only line of credit they were able to get approved for. And one day, they get to Walmart, and that card does not work. Not because their account is in bad standing, not because they missed a payment, but because Walmart decided that particular card costs them too much to process. That is a scenario playing out at more registers than most people realize. And this is not something isolated to the giant chains either, because what the settlement did is extend these new powers to all merchants. Every store, every restaurant, every small business that accepts cards. It has already been happening. I was at a dinner recently and the place had a sign posted right at the register letting customers know they no longer accept a specific card network. It is real. It is already here. And it is going to get more common fast. The ripple effects for lower-income households are particularly brutal, and the reason is straightforward. When you have higher household income, you typically carry several different cards. You have options. One card gets declined, you reach for another. But when you are living closer to the financial edge, you probably have one or two cards maximum. Maybe your credit score is not stellar, and you had a hard time getting approved at all. That means if your one card gets blocked, you are stuck. No backup plan. And think about what options remain if the credit card is gone. You have cash, which requires having cash on hand. You have debit, which requires having money in the account right now. Or you have buy now, pay later, which we will come back to. There is a sneaky angle to this story that the retail industry will never spotlight for you. And it is this. The retailers love to act like they have been quietly absorbing the cost of credit card processing fees out of the goodness of their hearts. But that is completely backwards. Those interchange fees have always been baked into the price of everything on the shelf. The stores were never eating that cost. You were. Every single time. The higher the cost of accepting cards, the higher the prices throughout the store to compensate. The store passes every dollar of operating cost through to the customer. That is how retail works. That is how every business works. So the consumer was already paying for the privilege of using a credit card through inflated prices. And now, with this settlement, consumers are going to face a second layer of cost on top of that, either through direct surcharges or through losing access to the card altogether. Now here is a development that could make this entire situation significantly worse. President Trump has pushed for credit card interest rates to be capped at 10%. Now whether that actually becomes law, that is still an open question. Nobody can tell you with certainty right now that this cap is coming. But if it does, the consequence for credit access would be severe, particularly for borrowers who already carry some risk on their profile. Because the way the credit system works is that higher-risk borrowers pay higher interest rates, and that higher rate is what allows lenders to take a chance on lending them money in the first place. If you cap the rate at 10%, a lot of lenders will simply stop offering cards to anyone who is not a nearly perfect borrower. The cards will disappear for the people who need them most. And if those people were using that card to buy groceries, they are going to have a problem that goes beyond just having the card declined at the register. The card might just cease to exist for them entirely. So pull all of this together. You have a settlement that lets retailers block specific cards and charge surcharges. You have grocery stores operating on near zero margins that are going to be the most aggressive about using these new tools. You have a possible interest rate cap that could eliminate credit access for millions of borrowers. And underneath all of this, you have a consumer base that in many cases is already treating the credit card as a lifeline, not a convenience. People are literally putting groceries on buy now, pay later right now. That is where things stand. And speaking of instability, let me bring in the second major story today, because it connects to everything we just discussed about the financial pressure building on American households, because you cannot talk about credit card dependency without talking about why people are dependent on it in the first place. And a big part of that answer is the job market, and the job market just got another massive blow. Amazon is preparing to cut roughly 30,000 jobs, and based on the reporting, this could hit as soon as next week. Let that number settle in for a moment. 30,000 jobs in January. This is shaping up to be the single largest corporate layoff of 2026, and we are not even 2 months into the year. We have covered the slow build of layoffs on this show for the better part of the past 2 years, but this one lands differently because of the scale and because of the timing. Now, this does not come completely out of nowhere if you have been paying attention. Amazon signaled last year that they were targeting a reduction of 300,000 jobs by the year 2030. 300,000. That number leaked out. Their PR team rushed to downplay it, and then nothing more was said publicly. But look at the trajectory. Back in late 2025, Amazon quietly cut 14,000 white-collar workers. That was a significant round of cuts that got somewhat overshadowed because UPS was simultaneously letting go of 48,000 people. Yes, 48,000 people in a single wave at UPS. But now here we are a few months later, and Amazon is back at it. This time at a scale that would eclipse anything in their entire 30-year history as a company. The previous record was 27,000 people let go back in 2022. This round would shatter that record by a significant margin. The departments in the crosshairs include Amazon Web Services, which is their cloud computing division, retail operations, Prime Video, human resources, and what they internally call people experience and technology. So these are not warehouse floor jobs. These are knowledge workers. These are white-collar professionals, many of them pulling six-figure salaries. And the reason that distinction matters is because those incomes were supporting spending in local economies across the country. When a software engineer loses their job, so does the restaurant they ate at twice a week. So does the gym. So does the coffee shop. All of that spending disappears from local economies simultaneously. Workers who are being let go are reportedly going to get a 90-day notice period, during which they can either apply for other internal positions or begin their external search. 90 days. On the surface, that sounds like reasonable notice. But anyone who has been job hunting in the current market knows that 90 days is not generous. It is barely a starting point. We are going to get into the specifics of the job market shortly, but the short version is this. The chances of landing a comparable high-paying job in 90 days in today's environment are extremely slim for most people. The math on the job market simply does not support that kind of timeline for most white-collar professionals right now. And if you thought Amazon was a standalone story this week, it is not. Because at almost the exact same time, UPS announced warehouse closures across multiple states. North Carolina, Michigan, and Alabama are all going to see UPS facilities shut down before the end of February. Now, the exact number of affected workers has not been officially disclosed, but these are large facilities. We are realistically talking somewhere in the range of 5,000 to 10,000 additional jobs gone. And this is on top of the 48,000 UPS already cut a few months ago. The driving force behind all of this at UPS is automation, and the numbers tell the story clearly. UPS has invested over $120 million to build out what amounts to a robotic workforce inside their warehouses. And from a pure financial calculation, the logic is ironclad. A robot does not take a lunch break. It does not call out sick. It does not need vacation time or benefits or parental leave. It runs continuously around the clock, 7 days a week. So if you spend $120 million to automate a facility, you can operate 24/7 with a fraction of the labor cost. And once the automation is in place, you need fewer facilities to handle the same volume, which is why you close warehouses. The math works perfectly for the shareholders. For the workers, it is a different story entirely. UPS issued the usual corporate statements about supporting displaced employees, helping them find new roles, and providing robust severance packages. And look, a severance package is better than nothing. but the severance only buys time. At some point, that runway ends. And then you are in the job market that we are about to describe, which is arguably the most difficult hiring environment of a generation. Before we get there, let me make a point about unemployment numbers because I think this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the economic conversation happening right now. The official unemployment rate gets quoted constantly as evidence that the economy is fundamentally healthy. Unemployment is low, they say, so things cannot be that bad. But that number is calculated using a methodology that has been narrowed considerably over the past few decades. It excludes people who have stopped actively looking for work. It excludes people working part-time because they cannot find full-time work. It excludes people working gig jobs below poverty wages just to generate some income. When you factor in what economists call functional unemployment, meaning people who are technically working but earning poverty-level wages or stringing together 2 and 3 part-time jobs just to cover basic bills, that number climbs dramatically. Some estimates put functional unemployment somewhere around 25%. That is 1 in 4 working-age Americans who are essentially not earning enough to sustain themselves. And that is the actual landscape that these 30,000 Amazon workers and the UPS workers are entering. Not the official number that gets cited on cable news. The real number, 25%. Now, the International Monetary Fund chose this exact same week to release a statement claiming that artificial intelligence could actually benefit lower-wage workers through what they are calling the spillover effect. And I want to spend a minute on this because the timing is remarkable and the logic deserves real scrutiny. Here is how the IMF explains the spillover effect. Workers who get access to AI tools supposedly become more productive, earn higher wages as a result, and then go out and spend that extra money at restaurants, childcare centers, retail shops, and healthcare providers. That increased demand for local services then creates more lower-wage service sector jobs. That is the theory. Here is my problem with that argument, especially in light of everything we just covered. The people losing jobs right now at Amazon are the exact high-wage workers the IMF is describing as the engine of this spillover. The software engineers, the operations leaders, the media professionals. These are the people who were supposed to be earning more because of AI enhancements and then going out and spending that money in the local economy. But they are getting let go, not promoted. And it is AI that is enabling those layoffs, not creating more jobs for them. The IMF research claims that about 10% of people with AI-enhanced roles tend to spend significantly more in their local economy. And past research suggests that for every 1 new technology job created, 4 additional local service jobs get created downstream. But here is the catch. Even if you accept those numbers at face value, the scale of displacement happening right now far outpaces the scale of new tech job creation. And the people competing for whatever service sector jobs do emerge from this so-called spillover effect, there are so many of them competing that wages get pushed down. If 100 people are willing to do the same job for less because they are desperate, the wages for that job fall. The spillover becomes a trickle. The wealth concentration angle on this is something I keep coming back to. Right now, the top 10% of earners in this country account for more than 60% of all consumer spending. Think about that split. The top 10% driving more than 60% of the spending. The bottom 90% responsible for less than 40% combined. When you have an economy that's lopsided, and then you start cutting the high-income jobs at scale through AI and automation, while simultaneously lower-income workers are getting squeezed on wages and credit access, you have a compression happening from both ends at the same time. Now let me bring this directly to the job seekers watching, because the data on the current hiring environment is some of the most sobering I have shared on this show. According to Greenhouse, which is a major hiring platform that tracks this data, the average job seeker right now has approximately a 0.4% chance of getting hired per application submitted. 0.4%. Let that register. That means, statistically speaking, a person trying to land a job right now has a better probability of getting accepted into Harvard University than getting hired from a single job application. Harvard acceptance rates run around 3 to 4%. Getting hired from one job application right now, under 0.5%, half of that. And this is not just a numbers problem. This is translating into lived experiences that are genuinely alarming. People are reporting sending out 500 applications, 1,000 applications, some well over 1,000, and getting almost nothing back. Not a rejection email, not an acknowledgement, nothing. Part of the reason the sheer volume of applications is failing to produce results is because AI has taken over the screening process on the employer side. Automated systems are processing the applications before any human eyes ever look at them, which means your resume needs to pass an algorithm before a person even sees it. And when every candidate is feeding their resume through AI optimization tools to maximize keyword matching, everything starts looking identical. Standing out has become nearly impossible. Recent graduates are taking some of the hardest hits right now. They are all competing for entry-level positions, which are exactly the roles most vulnerable to AI replacement. The very jobs that used to serve as the entry point into a career are disappearing the fastest. A recent graduate without a track record of workplace performance has almost no additional edge to offer beyond their degree, which many employers have deprioritized as a hiring signal. So you have a generation that went to school, took on student loan debt, graduated into a world where entry-level jobs are drying up, and is now staring at a 0.4% hit rate per application. And then on top of all of this, the job interview process itself has essentially become a form of unpaid labor. People are reporting that each time they go in for an interview, they are losing money in the process. They have to step away from gig work. They have to decline a shift. They are burning transportation costs. And the interview processes have grown longer and more elaborate. Multiple rounds, take-home projects, panel presentations. Some of these processes now span weeks. And then at the end of it, you hear nothing, or you get a form rejection. The investment of time and money that applicants are making just to participate in the hiring process has become a real financial cost, not a neutral activity. And here is where it gets even more troubling. Because people are so aware of how competitive the market is, some job seekers have started preemptively offering to accept salaries below what is being advertised. We are talking about candidates going into interviews and saying, look, I understand what the posting says, but I will take $10,000 or $12,000 less. Just consider me. And this is becoming increasingly common. The desperation is real and it is measurable. But here is the catch that makes this strategy backfire. Employers consistently interpret a below-ask salary offer as a sign of low confidence or poor self-assessment of the role. It does not make the candidate look flexible or easy to work with. It makes them look like they do not understand what the job is worth. And so the desperation move actually damages the candidacy further in many cases, even though the person was just trying to give themselves an edge in an impossible market. And there is another layer on top of that. Many companies post job listings at a salary range that is below what they are actually prepared to offer. They post low intentionally, and then the applicant, already trying to come in under market, is now offering far below what the job would actually pay. It is a race to the financial floor, and when enough candidates are willing to accept below market wages, it creates downward pressure on wages across the entire sector. If you are currently employed and you ask for a raise, your employer knows there are a dozen people outside who applied for your job at a lower rate than you make now. The asking for a raise conversation has never been harder. For some people, raising the subject is a termination risk because there is literally a line of people behind them willing to do the same job for less. This is the definition of a buyer's market for labor. Too many candidates, not enough good jobs, and the competition drives prices down. It mirrors almost exactly what happens in real estate when inventory surges and buyers disappear. Prices collapse. We are seeing that same dynamic with home prices right now in many markets, with significant price cuts becoming the norm in places that were red hot not long ago. The labor market and the housing market are both experiencing versions of the same correction, and the people caught in the middle are feeling it from every direction simultaneously. The credit card story and the job market story are actually the same story. It is a story about the financial floor collapsing underneath the households that were already closest to the edge. Credit cards getting blocked at grocery stores means less purchasing flexibility for lower-income families. Tens of thousands of white-collar jobs disappearing means less spending power across the income spectrum. Wages getting driven down by desperate applicants means the paychecks that do exist buy less than they should. And buy now, pay later expanding to cover groceries because credit cards are being declined and bank accounts are running dry. That is the picture we are painting here. It is not one piece of bad news. It is multiple systems failing at the same time in ways that reinforce each other. The people who are going to navigate this best are the ones who recognize the shift that is happening early, adjust their financial positioning before they are forced to, and start building income streams that do not depend on someone else deciding whether to hire them or which card to accept at the register. But here is something genuinely worth highlighting, because this show is not just about cataloging problems. Small business formation just hit a record high. People who are fed up with sending applications into a void. People who are tired of lowballing their own worth just to maybe get a callback. People who have skills and knowledge and drive but have had doors slammed in their faces by automated rejection systems. A significant number of them are deciding to stop playing that game. They are starting businesses. They are building freelance practices. They are launching side projects and turning them into primary income sources. That is the American spirit working exactly the way it is supposed to. And look, it is not easy. Building something of your own from scratch requires grinding for months, sometimes years, before it starts to pay off. But consider the alternative. You could spend those same months sending out thousands of applications at below-market salary offers, getting filtered out by AI screeners, going on unpaid interview cycles, and never once building anything for yourself. At least when you bet on yourself, the upside belongs to you. Every hour you put in builds something you own. And a lot of people who took that leap a few years ago because they had no other choice are sitting now in a much better position than they ever would have been at a corporate job. The income tends to be higher, the ceiling is entirely different, and nobody gets to tell you which credit card you have to use at the register. Now let me talk about something that does not get discussed enough in these conversations about AI and automation and job losses, because most of the coverage focuses entirely on what is being taken away. What jobs are disappearing? What industries are shrinking? What skills are becoming obsolete? And all of that is real and worth understanding. But the other side of that coin is that AI has also lowered the barrier to starting something of your own to a level that was unimaginable even 5 years ago. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on how significant that is. Think about what it used to take to launch a small business or a freelance practice. You needed capital. You needed connections. You needed to hire people for tasks you could not do yourself. If you wanted to market your business, you either paid an agency or you spent years learning it yourself. If you needed legal documents, you paid a lawyer. If you needed a website, you paid a developer. If you needed to produce content, you needed equipment and editing skills and a whole production setup. The startup costs alone priced most people out before they ever got started. That entire equation has changed. The same AI technology that is eliminating white-collar jobs at Amazon and automating warehouses at UPS is simultaneously available to anyone with a laptop and an internet connection. A single person today can use AI tools to handle tasks that would have previously required a team of 5 or 6 people. Marketing, copywriting, customer service, data analysis, research, scheduling, basic legal document drafting. All of it is accessible right now at a fraction of what it used to cost. And that means the economics of starting something small have shifted completely in favor of the individual who is willing to move fast and learn. The people who are going to win in this economy are not the ones waiting for the job market to recover. They are not the ones sending application number 800 hoping this one lands differently. They are the ones who looked at the same AI tools that are eliminating their job category and said, how do I use this to build something for myself instead of waiting for someone else to tell me I am worth hiring? That shift in perspective is worth more right now than any credential or any resume optimization trick. And here is the thing about the gig economy that people need to understand, because there is a real difference between gig work as a survival mechanism and building something with genuine long-term value. Gig work, driving for a rideshare platform, doing food delivery, completing micro-tasks on labor marketplaces, that is trading your time for dollars with a ceiling on what you can earn and no asset being built underneath you. There is nothing wrong with doing that to survive. A lot of people are doing exactly that right now and they have no other choice. But it is a treadmill. You stop running, the income stops. There is no equity, no compounding, no leverage. Every hour you put in produces 1 hour of income and nothing else. Building something of your own is a completely different model. It is harder at the start, it pays less initially, and there is a real period where you are putting in more than you are getting back. But what you are building underneath the daily grind is an asset, something that produces income whether you are working that exact hour or not. A freelance client base, a content platform, a service business with recurring customers, a product that can be sold repeatedly without your direct involvement every single time. That is the compounding that gig work never provides. And once that compounding starts working, the income trajectory looks nothing like what a traditional job ever could have offered. I want to be direct about something here because I think a lot of people hear this kind of message and think it does not apply to them specifically. Maybe you are thinking, that sounds good, but I am not a tech person. I do not have a marketable skill. I do not know what I would even offer. And I hear that. But here is what I would push back on. Every single person watching this show right now has skills and knowledge that other people would pay for. Maybe it is a trade skill. Maybe it is decades of experience in an industry. Maybe it is knowledge of a local market, a specific community, a niche subject that you have spent years learning inside and out. The question is not whether you have something valuable. The question is whether you have packaged it and put it in front of the right people. And this is where AI tools specifically change the game for people who are not naturally tech savvy or marketing savvy. Because the hardest part of building something used to be the packaging and the reaching people part. Coming up with the right message, writing the content, building the audience. That required either a specific set of skills or the money to hire someone who had them. That barrier is essentially gone now. You can describe what you know and what problem you solve, and AI can help you turn that into a professional-looking offer, a website, a social media presence, a set of marketing materials, in a weekend, for almost nothing. The people who are going to look back on this period in 5 or 10 years and say that this was actually the best thing that ever happened to them are the ones who got pushed out of the traditional system, and instead of spending all their energy trying to get back in, they used that energy to build something outside of it. That is not a small group. That is already happening at scale. Record small business formation is not a footnote. It is a signal that a lot of Americans have already done the math on the traditional job market and decided the numbers do not add up anymore. Now I want to tie this back to where we started today, because everything is connected. The credit card changes hitting lower-income households at the grocery store, the 30,000 Amazon jobs disappearing, the UPS warehouse closures, the job market with a 0.4% hiring rate per application. All of these things are symptoms of the same underlying shift. The economy, as it has been structured for the past several decades, the one built around stable corporate employment, credit access for everyone, reliable wage growth, is reorganizing itself around a smaller group of winners at the top and a much larger group of people who are going to have to figure out a different way to operate. That is not a comfortable thing to say. But I think most people watching this already feel it. You feel it when the grocery bill keeps going up. You feel it when your credit card gets declined at the register for a reason that has nothing to do with your finances. You feel it when you send out 500 job applications and hear nothing back. The system is telling you something, and the people who hear that message clearly and adjust early are going to be in a completely different position than the ones who keep waiting for things to go back to the way they were. So if you are watching this today and you are in the job search grind, I want you to seriously consider what skills you have that someone would pay for directly. Because the path through this economy is not going to be found through submitting application number 1001. It is going to be found by building something that does not depend on an algorithm deciding whether you are worth a callback. Thank you for spending time with me today on the Miller Report. If this was useful, hit subscribe and make sure notifications are on so you do not miss what we cover next. Check out the video on screen right now. I will see you in the next one.